Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a genuinely groundbreaking piece of work today. We're exploring Zofia Hajnal's 2026 doctoral dissertation called Reinterpreting the Moral Economy, Building on the Economic Possibilities of Selflessness. Now, I am absolutely thrilled to share this with you because her research promises to fundamentally flip literally everything we've been taught about how economics works. Seriously, if you've ever felt this weird disconnect between cold textbook economic theories and your own personal moral compass, well, this explainer is going to connect those dots for you in a massive way. Okay, let's dive into this. Are human needs actually unlimited? Because if you open almost any standard economics textbook, the very first bedrock assumption you'll read is that human wants are endless, but resources are scarce, right? It's the entire foundation of the discipline. It just assumes we are hardwired to want more and more and more. But what if that foundational axiom is completely flawed? What if we've basically built our entire global operating system on a total misunderstanding of human nature? To really grasp Hajnal's critique, we have to look at how we even define economics in the first place. There's this stark contrast between the mainstream traditional definition and a much more humane approach. Mainstream economics, it's pretty cold and mechanical. It defines the science purely as the allocation of scarce resources among competing ends. It's basically just a giant math problem. But Hajnal draws on economists like Angus Deaton to push for a humane definition. Economics as the reasoned evaluation of social well-being. It totally shifts the ultimate goal from pure resource efficiency to, actual human flourishing. When we ignore that humane definition, we end up living in what Hajnal diagnoses as a materialistic bubble. And this broken system presents three major symptoms. First up is value corruption, which is essentially when materialistic ideas infiltrate and just rot our ethical systems from the inside. Second, runaway accumulation. This is where overconsumption meets rising inequality and the whole system just accelerates completely out of control. And finally, my absolute favorite term from her research, a socially upstream propulsion of resources. Think about that visual for a second. Basically, wealth defies gravity. The system makes it easier for capital, information, and ideas to flow upwards to the already wealthy rather than trickling down. And that leaves a massive moral void at the very center of our society. Which brings us to a really powerful quote cited in the text from behavioral economist Laszlo Tos, "We live in a moral vacuum." Now, think about your own life for a minute. Think about the burnout, the absolute exhaustion so many of us feel. It's not that we as humans lack empathy, far from it. Hajnal argues that our empathy is actively suppressed by an economic framework that actively rewards what she calls jungle behavior. We've built this infrastructure that basically forces us to act selfishly just to survive, leaving our natural, moral instincts completely suffocated. So what's the fix? Well, the source material points us toward the missing link, a concept known as the moral economy. To figure out our future, we actually have to look backward. Historically, societies didn't treat the economy as some separate, untouchable mathematical beast. Instead, they embedded their economies directly within social and moral relationships. The economy served the community, not the other way around. And this concept isn't entirely new. Let's move to and see how this builds across modern history. Here's a quick timeline of the key thinkers who really documented this. Back in 1944, Karl Polanyi wrote about how early economies functioned long before the free market completely took over. Then in 1971, E.P. Thompson looked at 18th century English crowds to show how communities had a shared, deeply ingrained understanding of economic justice. And in 1976, James C. Scott defined the subsistence ethic in peasant societies, this idea that everyone had a fundamental right to basic survival, and any economic system that failed to provide that was deemed morally illegitimate. Past societies prioritized shared values over pure, unadulterated self-interest. Karl Polanyi summarized this beautifully. He said, "The outstanding discovery of recent historical and anthropological research is that man's economy, as a rule, is submerged in his social relationships." Polanyi really highlighted a forgotten ideal. Humans historically acted to safeguard their social standing, their community ties, and their relationships. They didn't just relentlessly hoard material goods. Our modern obsession with endless accumulation, it's actually the historical exception, not the rule. But here is where Hajnal's dissertation takes a massive leap forward. She proposes a shift from simply studying the moral economy of the past to actively practicing moral economics right now in the present. This isn't just about fondly looking at how 18th century farmers shared their wheat. Moral economics is the rigorous scientific practice of building ethical elements directly into modern economic theory and models. It's quite literally about upgrading the operating system of the science itself. And this brilliantly illustrates the upgrade. We're comparing two famous theories of human needs here. Most of us know Abraham Maslow's pyramid, right? It's a subjective hierarchy that basically tells us our wants are endless. Once we get one thing, we just climb up and want the next. But Hodgnall relies instead on the Chilean economist Manfred Max-Neef. Max-Neef proposed a finite, non-hierarchical matrix of universal human needs. He argued that our true fundamental needs, things like subsistence, protection, affection, and freedom, are actually limited, and they are universal across all cultures. Max-Neef also introduced this incredible concept called synergetic satisfiers. These are actions, values, or arrangements that satisfy multiple human needs simultaneously without harming anybody else. And guys, this concept completely changes the game. It proves that, contrary to what the textbooks claim, our aggregate human needs are actually satiable. We can literally have enough. We don't have to endlessly consume to be fulfilled, especially when one single action, like, say, caring for a community garden, can satisfy our need for substance, participation, and creation all at once. But wait, if our core needs are finite and satiable, does that mean we eventually just get bored and stop wanting to do anything at all? Well, no, because according to Hodgnall's sweeping research, there is exactly one human need that is truly insatiable. Just one. So the crucial point is, our deepest, most relentless, truly unlimited need is the need to help others. This completely upends the cynical idea that humans are inherently selfish and greedy by nature. The source material argues that once our basic finite needs are met, what we actually crave more than anything else in the world is to assist those around us. It is quite literally hardwired into us. Hodgnall states it so clearly. The only need that can hardly be fully satisfied is our need to help others. I want you to really think about what you would do if you never had to worry about paying your bills again. Most people wouldn't just sit in a dark room. They would create, they would share, they would volunteer, they'd help. But our current materialistic systems, driven by that jungle behavior, leave us so overworked and overwhelmed that we are completely blocked from acting on this deeply inherent desire. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Hodgnall transforms this natural empathy into cold, hard economic logic through a concept she calls rational selflessness. Rational selflessness is the recognition that helping others isn't just a nice, warm, fuzzy moral act. It is a highly logical, rational engine for actual economic value creation. When you share resources, you don't just lose them. You generate and multiply value across society, and you gain intrinsic ethical value yourself. It's literally the smartest economic move we can possibly make. If we systematically contrast the old way with this new paradigm, the differences are just night and day. In mainstream economics, the core driver is self-interest. In moral economics, it's rational selflessness. The old output goal is limitless growth, which, let's be honest, we know is mathematically impossible on a finite planet, whereas the new goal is sustainable equilibrium. And finally, the system result shifts from runaway accumulation for a tiny few to shared value creation for the many. It is a completely different architecture for how society functions. So how does this actually work in practice? Hodgnall outlines a step-by-step feedback loop, which is honestly the ultimate plot twist for curing our materialistic bubble. Step 1. We recognize our fundamental, infinite need to help others. Step 2. We act with rational selflessness, knowing it's logical. Step 3. Those actions physically multiply economic value, because shared resources are used way more efficiently and create stronger communities. Step 4. This multiplication allows us to reach a sustainable societal equilibrium, where everyone's finite needs are met, completely freeing them up to help others, and the loop starts all over again. You might be asking, okay, how do we actually get there? Interestingly, the source material explicitly notes that the fix isn't necessarily massive top-down government mandates or forcing everyone to behave. Instead, the path forward relies heavily on education. It's about elevating individual awareness of rational selflessness, basically just teaching people that their urge to help is actually an economic superpower. And mathematically, it's about aligning our easily satiated, finite material needs with the actual carrying capacity of our environment. Which brings us to our final thought. I want to leave you with a question that gets to the very heart of this entire explainer. If the only truly infinite human need is the need to help others, what would an economy built for that actually look like? Imagine the kind of world we could live in if our systems rewarded our best instincts instead of our absolute worst. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible source material today. And as always, keep questioning the assumptions around you.